based on this, I just think you'd have to move it back a century. Okay, well, why didn't all the scholars move it back a century? Like, I would hope you would have some more arguments than just, well, because this person is mentioned. I feel like you would need more. But my thing is, does it impact the interpretation? Does it impact the interpretation? That's what you really look for and consider. But let's see where he's going to go with all of this background information.
Again, here in Judges 10, verse 6, and the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord, and served the Baals and the Ashtoreths, the gods of Syria, the gods of Sidon, the gods of Moab, the gods of the people of Ammon, and the gods of the Philistines. And they forsook the Lord and did not serve him. So the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of the Philistines and in the hands of the people of Ammon.
Now, once again, what I want you to see, Judges chapter 10, verse 6, I want you to see this again. And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord and served Balaam and Ashtaroth, and the gods of Syria and the gods of Zidon and the gods of Moab and the gods of the children of Ammon and the gods of the Philistines, and forsook the Lord and served not him. What I want you to see is over and over and over and over and over again, they are doing evil in the sight of the Lord. Whether it's Israel combined, whether it's them separated in the southern and northern kingdom, whether it's Judah, whether it's Israel, over and over and over and over, failure. And any time of supposed spiritual victory or spiritual success is always short-lived, and they go right back into idolatry, right back into rebellion, right back into ungodliness. And the point is, God's law only condemns and reveals the sin. It doesn't fix the problem. And it's bizarre to me that Christians, we read that over and over. This is the way Christians tend to handle the Old Testament. They failed. But now that we're in the new covenant, we succeed. But 2,000 years of church history looks very similar to me to the exact same history of Israel. Sin, failure, division, fighting, idolatry, and ungodliness. Because we are sinners. We are sinners. People had a sinful nature in the old covenant. People have a sinful nature in the new covenant. And guess what? We are saved by a imputed righteousness. We are declared righteous by faith, and we are not saved by being infused with their righteousness. I think we have to see that. But it's weird how Christians approached at the Old Testament. Man, they were all messed up, but not us. We're not like them. Well, no, we're very much like them, but it doesn't matter if you're in Judges, doesn't matter if you're in Samuel, doesn't matter if you're in Jeremiah. Guess what you see? Sin, failure, division, rebellion, and idolatry. It just repeats itself over and over and over again.
And so this now transitions us to Jephthah, and then, of course, to Samson, who is the one who addresses the issue of the Philistines. And so in chapters 13 to 16, of course, we see all this about Samson. And remember, the story ends with Samson in Gaza in Dagon's temple. And, of course, the temple falls down and such because of Samson's strength. And so the Philistines are part of Israel's history already. We come here to 1 Samuel chapter 4, and you see the Philistines mentioned. We're like, oh, okay, remember all these things that we talked about. Now let me address this question. How does this fit together chronologically? I've mentioned already that it is likely that Samson and Samuel correspond chronologically somehow. Maybe Samson died and Samuel's born, 5 or 10 years later. Maybe there is some overlap in time. We don't know for sure. But it is very similar. Think of it in this way. Saul begins ruling in 1050 BC. Was Samuel 50 years old when Saul was anointed king? Remember, his sons start to judge when the people asked for a king. And so Samuel's toward the end of his life. So, if that's true, if he's 50, okay, around 1100, that's about the time of Samson. If he's 75, I don't I didn't run across his age when he died. Okay, maybe I missed it somewhere, but I didn't see it anywhere. So if he was 75 when his sons start ruling poorly and Israel wants a king, then that's about 1125. There's definitely going to be some overlap with Samson. Whatever the case, it's definitely fitting together, at least within 10 or 20 years. And so you have Samson destroying Dagon's temple in Gaza, and now you see Dagon up here in the north. And that's where they take the ark after they capture it. And so certainly we cannot say specifically, but we're not too far apart in time.
Okay, now the question would be, if we're close in time, if we're not close in time, does it have any impact on how you interpret any of this? Does it have any interpretive disadvantages or advantages? Does it add confusion or not confusion? I mean, that's the question that's just the question I would ask. Like, I mean, a lot of these things are interesting to look at, right? I mean, you can get into sometimes Bible college or seminary. You end up, having a 45-minute argument in class over it. No, I think it was 1050. No. It was 1020. No. It was 1040. No, it was 998. And you're like, oh man. Okay. And so then when it's all said and done, someone, I typically, you want to raise your hand going, and so what? So what? We argued for 45 minutes over the time. Does it impact the interpretation? If we're like, okay, 1 Samuel chapter 4. Well, there was an overlap with Samuel and Samson. And Samson, destroyed the Philistines seemed to be destroyed, but now here they are back. Is that like they made a quick comeback? They weren't really destroyed? Like, what do we do? So did Samson fail? Did Samson succeed? What did Sam like? Is that the question we need to try to answer? Like, yeah. So, yeah, I don't know, but that whenever you see those kinds of debates, before you jump in, just step back and go, no, wait a minute. How is this going to impact? Like, trying to understand the possible overlap between Samson and Samuel, does it have any impact on how you interpret 1 Samuel chapter 4? Are you understanding what happens? That's all I'm at. That's all I'm asking. All right, let's continue.
The other question here is, how much after chapter 3 does chapter 4 happen? Does it happen within months? Is it several years? We don't know. But just a few background ideas here in this way. Now, if you look at your maps here again, and you look at the map 4, the land of the 12 tribes, and you look there on the Mediterranean coast, there on the western side, you see the 5 key cities of the Philistines. Gaza is in the south. This is where Samson was when he died. Work your way northward to Ashkelon, and then Ashdod. That's where they're going to take the ark here now. And then move eastward to Ekron and south to Gath. And so the 3 key cities that we will talk about in the next few chapters are Ashdod, Ekron, and Gath. Now work your way straight north pretty much, a little bit to the east. You see Aphek, about 20 miles north of Ekron. And then work your way eastward, a little south, you see Shilo. It's about 20 miles from Aphek. Okay. Now, the point is simply this. The Philistines are expanding their territory. Dan has already been kicked out. You see Dan there on your maps? Okay, right next to Ekron. They couldn't settle the land. And so they move northward. And it's in part because of the Philistines. Okay. Now, as for Ebenezer, this rock, we don't...
That's interesting when we say they couldn't settle the land. They couldn't or they wouldn't. And if they couldn't, why couldn't they? Because didn't God promise that they could? Right? I mean, I think that would be like when you say that they could not settle the land, why not? Weren't they promised victory in the land? So was it that they couldn't or was it that they wouldn't? Now, if we were studying this subject for the Bible study exercise that would become a homework assignment, but I'm not going to give you a homework assignment. Remember, we're here for the guided tour of Shilo. We want to know what happened in Shilo. So that's what we're listening for. All of this other information is interesting, but that's just an interesting way of saying it, that Dan was kicked out because they couldn't settle the land. The reason they couldn't was because of the Philistines. They couldn't or they wouldn't. And if they couldn't, why couldn't they?
I don't know exactly where it was, but probably within 2 or 3 miles of Aphek, eastward toward Shilo. So with this background here, we see verse 1 telling us, back here in 1 Samuel, that the Philistines wage war against Israel, and 4,000 Israelites die, at least here initially. The language suggests to us that Israel ran away. They retreated. And it was a decisive defeat. So then, we see next in verse 2 these things. Then the Philistines put themselves in battle array against Israel. When they joined battle, Israel was defeated by the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 men of the army in the field. And so we see here this. Now, verse 3. And when the people had come into the camp, the elders of Israel said, Why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord from Shilo to us, that when it comes among us, it may save us from the hand of our enemies. Now, I'm not the only one here, but what comes almost first to my mind as I read this is Joshua and Ai. And you remember, of course, they brought the ark of the covenant through the Jordan River, and they marched around Jericho. The walls fall down. Everybody's excited. They go to Ai, and they are trounced. And how do they respond? Well, you remember there in Joshua 7, they basically say, Lord, what happened? Why did you defeat us there? Very similar to what we see here. But there's a very different response and a very different mentality in Joshua 7 compared to here. In Joshua, they're like, we sinned. How do we take care of this? There's not anything like that thought in this passage. Very different mentality.
Now, that is an interesting contrast. I do like that contrast of how they responded when they were defeated in Joshua and how they respond to this defeat. Why do they respond so differently? And of course, the ultimate question is, wherefore hath the Lord smitten us today? Why did the Lord smite them? Why were they defeated? What led to their defeat? I mean, this is at Shilo. This is the place, right? This is where we need to understand exactly what happened, all right? I'm sorry. This defeat hasn't happened at Shilo yet. All right. They're going to go to Shilo to get something. So this defeat happens prior to Shilo. So this is like on our way in our walking tour to Shilo. We see a defeat happens before Shilo, right? Because they're going to go to Shilo to get something. But why were they defeated? What's the answer? What's the answer to that question? Let's see if he answers that question.
They begin with the right question here, but that's where it ends. Okay. At Ebenezer, and you may recall that the term Ebenezer means rock of help or stone of help. Obviously, Yahweh did not help them at this rock. But after asking the right question, they don't seek out a prophet like Samuel. They don't consult the Urim or the Thummim. They don't wait for an answer. They take matters into their own hands. There are actually 3 commands here in this verse. First of all, let us take the ark from Shilo. Now notice how I translate that. The New King James says, let us bring the ark. Not an altogether wrong meaning of this term, but take is clearly the point. And we'll come back to that here in a moment or so. They took the ark. At least that's the plan. And so let us take the ark, and then secondly, let it come into our midst. And the third command, let it save us. So 3 commands, one right after the other here. Obviously, they're trying to act like Joshua did in chapters 3 to 6 of Joshua. when they crossed the Jordan and Jericho and so forth. They wanted the symbol of Yahweh's presence to be with them as they fought. The difference was, Yahweh told Joshua to do that. There's no indication here at all that Yahweh told these men to do these things here. And so Israel takes the ark. This is a very common word in the Hebrew. Okay? And yeah, it can have the idea of carrying.
It's interesting that he's not, is he going to answer the question, why were they defeated? Why were they defeated? What led to this defeat? Now, he says they're looking for the wrong solution. The wrong solution is, let us go to Shilo and get the ark and let it come amongst us and let it save us. Now, clearly the focus seems to be on the object, and you could argue, is this a misplaced trust? Are they putting their faith in the wrong thing? But why were they defeated? Why were they defeated? Now, why I think the question of why they were defeated is the most pressing question in relation to our study of Samuel, or our study of Jeremiah in chapter 7, where he's like, go to Shiloh and see what happened. Well, we needed to know what happened in Shiloh, but why did it happen? Why were they defeated here? Before they get to, because the defeat that leads them to go to Shiloh to get things is very important in this whole overall discussion. What led to their defeat? Why did God allow them to be defeated before they go to Shiloh? Why? What was it? I think that's the question that needs to be answered. Let's see if he answers it.
But here it's really the idea of stealing it, taking it from God's throne room. You look on your outline and you'll see the title of the sermon here, The Capturing of Yahweh, or Yahweh is Captured, or however I worded it there. And that's the point. They're not just carrying it into battle, they're actually capturing Yahweh. We don't have to wait till verse 11 for this to happen. The same exact word, take, is used in verse 11 as used here in verse 3. Unfortunately.
Okay, now we got to think this. Did they go steal the ark? He's implying that they stole it. Did they go capture the ark? Did they go steal it? I don't know about. Okay, we. Oh boy, that's something. I want everyone to work on it yourself. What you can look up the Hebrew there and like, is that what it's referencing? Hey, let us go steal the ark. Let us go capture the ark. They captured Yahweh. They captured the ark of God, the presence of God, or they thought they did. Were they trying to steal it? I don't know. Like, what's the implication there? That they had no more right to the ark than the Philistines? Now, I still want to know why they were defeated. Why were they defeated? And are you saying that they were wrong to go get the ark? I am okay. Let's keep listening.
Your translations typically are going to translate those two words differently. I don't think it's really any different in mentality at all. The Philistines captured the ark, but Israel did first. So let's keep going then. Verse 4. So the people sent to Shiloh, that they might bring from there the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, who dwells between the cherubim. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant of God. Now remember, they're at Ebenezer. They've got to go to Shiloh. That's, approaching 20 miles away. And they come and they capture the ark. And note the description here. Yahweh dwells between the cherubs. And they take him and bring him back to battle. Now notice what's going on here. Hophni and Phinehas, who are supposed to be guarding the tabernacle, say, hey, great, go ahead. And obviously they join in. They go along. So we have the religious leaders and the civil leaders, the elders, coming together and jointly they capture Yahweh. The ones who have been put in charge by Yahweh to govern Israel, the religious leaders, the Levites, and the civil leaders, the elders in the gate, they're completely corrupted. You can understand why people wanted a king. The way God set things up wasn't working so well, not because of Yahweh, but because of the people. Now, by capturing Yahweh here, this is not an indication that Yahweh is impotent.
Okay, so one, he still haven't told us why they were defeated. And two, he seems to be really committed to this idea that they captured it. They stole it. I'm trying to wrap my mind around the implications of that. Hey, they were not supposed to take it, but they took it. They captured it. And the people who were supposed to protect it went along with it. So this entire thing was the great heist, the great capturing of Yahweh, the great stealing of Yahweh. Instead of looking at why they were defeated, he seems to focus on the sin of them, that taking the ark was somehow wrong. Was it the taking of the ark was wrong, or that they were placing their trust in the object instead of the one who it was supposed to point them to?
What it tells us is that Yahweh is going to fulfill his word in this way. Judgment against Eli's house is going to come. Punishment against Israel is going to take place. Do you see what's happening here? Yahweh is allowing this mistreatment against him in order to accomplish his purposes, in order to establish his honor. Yahweh does the same thing today. He allows us to mistreat him in church. He allows bad doctrine to flourish. He allows wicked behavior to take place in his churches in order to bring about his purposes. And usually it's judgment. The greatest example of this in the history of the world, of course, is at the cross. Lots of bad theology there. Lots of bad doctrine and wickedness by the religious leaders of Israel. And yet through that behavior, that mistreatment of Yahweh's Son, he accomplished his purposes of redemption. And so our first key point is this. Yahweh is captured by Israel, and yet Yahweh allows it to happen to accomplish what he wants to accomplish.
So God allows all of this to happen so he can accomplish what he wants to accomplish. So he wanted 4,000 people to die in verse 2. And then he wanted, and then he wanted 30,000 footmen to die in verse 10. Hey, I'm going to let all this bad theology, I'm going to let myself be captured. I'm going to let them capture the ark so that my purposes can be done. And my purpose is I want 34,000 people to die. Right? Or no, that wasn't God's purpose, or that was God's purpose. And if it was God's purpose, then do the people get blamed or did God get blamed? Well, God don't get blamed, the people get blamed. But God allowed it all to happen. Yeah, this raises all kinds of questions. I still want to know, what did Israel do for them to be defeated? And what does it mean that they stole the ark? Well, God allowed himself to be captured. He just allowed himself to be stolen, and he allowed himself to be stolen so that his purpose could be accomplished, which seemed to be 34,000 people dying. Okay.
Now, I mentioned here last time about Psalm 8 and the youth, the children being used by God to accomplish his purposes. Well, you remember Aslan and C.S. Lewis taking up this theme. Aslan willingly goes to his death. Same ideas. Lewis is certainly picking up on these themes. And so here's our first thought. Yahweh is in control, even to bring about judgment.
Yahweh is captured, but he's actually in control. The ark is stolen, but he's in control. And instead of using that control in order to preserve life, And instead of using that control to stop all of this from happening, he uses this control in order to bring about judgment of some sort. I don't. Yeah, it's a little. Yeah, so it's a little confusing. It's a little confusing, but yeah, I think we'll stop right there. It appears that we've had some kind of internet issue. I don't know what has happened, but I'm getting a notification from a podcasting app that this episode that's currently live has already been posted. So I don't know what happened, but we lost connection somehow. There is no indicator at all that anything happened. There is nothing on my, yeah. There is nothing here telling me anything went wrong. So we'll just count this as 44 minutes of well, if you listen to me live, great. I hope you got something from that. And I'm just going to delete all of this. So I don't know what happened. I don't have any clue. I just got notification from Apple Podcasts that this program that you're currently listening to was just posted. So something went wrong. So, all right. Okay. I don't know what to say. All right. So we'll just end this now. I wish, I don't know what to do now. I don't know what to do. There's no way to try to fix this at this point. So, I hope you got something from that. I guess what to do is in 1 Samuel, you can go try to figure out why were they defeated and did they steal the ark? Those are the two questions that came from that sermon review. And, well, thanks for listening. Everyone have a great evening. God bless.